This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there, welcome to this edition of Global Business Africa. In the course of the hour, we'll run through all the business news stories you need to know about from Africa and beyond. Let's start the program though with a run through the market here for you. So Kenya really is a story of two different tangents for growth, if you will. 6% macro growth is actually fairly impressive, but businesses really are struggling, including listed ones. Today, two companies who used to be listed at the NSE have essentially had their assets on the block or sold. The cement maker ARM has agreed to sell off all of its cement and non-cement assets to National Cement for $50 million. Deacons, a fashion retailer, that's also asking for EOIs for its assets, and that's mostly 9 stores in Kenya and Rwanda. Here's what's coming up tonight. A leading Huawei executive lashes out at the US government's restrictions. About 7 million voters go to the polls in Malawi in what's expected to be a tightly contested poll. And we'll introduce you to a young man with a plan to recycle all the garbage in Senegal's capital. All right then, quite a bit to get through tonight, but let's start in the telecommunications sector, where a leading Huawei executive has lashed out at the US government's effective ban on the Chinese tech company buying components from American companies. Huawei's Vice President for Europe, Abraham Liu, says that the company was being bullied by the United States despite it respecting laws and regulations. In the meantime, Google has also suspended some business with the Chinese telecommunications firm. A German media report seemed to vouch for Huawei's reputation. It said that years of tests in the EU showed no security loopholes in its products. Liu warned that other firms could be next.
Those among us who cherish the rule of law should be worried. You believe in the free market, in the respect of mutually agreed rules, under the principle of non-discrimination. Should you be alarmed with the behavior of the US administration against Huawei?
Right, then let's address the supply chain risk really at the heart of this story. Huawei has been building up a stockpile of self-made chips for quite a while now in order to supplement the components that it does source from US suppliers like Intel, Micron and Qualcomm. But the question still remains, is China's domestic chip industry up to scratch? And can the country really be self-sufficient in that highly competitive silicon sector?
Even the most complex creations begin with the basic building blocks. Rare earth minerals are a key element in a wide range of materials required for high-tech manufacturing, and the high-end chip industry is no exception. Luckily for Chinese producers, rare earth is one ingredient that's in ample supply. China's reserves of the minerals account for roughly 30% of the world's total, and the country produces more than 80% of the world's supply. It's a fluke of nature and geography that Chinese tech firms are wasting no time taking advantage of, and the initiative shows. From 2013 to 2017, the compound growth rate of China's chip industry was 21%. That's 5 times faster than the global average. And Chinese chips are managing to secure a significant slice of the global market share. The country's mobile intelligent terminal chips accounted for over 20% of world sales, while Chinese TV core chips accounted for roughly 30%. There are companies like HiSilicon which devoted significant resources to building a backup to ensure the survival of Huawei, and others who are racing to lift up China's chip-producing prowess. Research on a dual-band chip for China's domestic Beidou navigation system has made great progress. And Chinese tech giant Alibaba is moving into the chip industry too with the acquisition of Zhongtian Micro, China's only independent chip design firm. It echoes the company's existing efforts to develop artificial intelligence-based chips on the back of its more than $15 billion funded global research and development program.
Now, at the same time, the Chinese tech company is trying to get on with business As usual, it's just stated global release of a new smartphone. It's called the Honor 20, as well as the Honor 20 Pro cell phone. This happened, of course, at a ceremony in London. Previously referred to as the Honor 11, the Honor 20 is the company's latest flagship handset with a more mid-range price tag, depending on the option you go for. Huawei has chosen Europe for many new releases in recent times, the most recent of which is a P30 Pro in the French capital just 2 months ago. The company considers Europe to be one of its most important markets. It is, of course, the first release since Washington's decision to restrict tech sales to Huawei. China's ambassador to Kenya says Beijing will not allow Kenya to get caught up in the middle of this US-China trade friction. The ambassador further says that the Chinese government and companies are contributing to lowering Kenyan imports in order to enhance the East African countries' economy. Here's CGTN's Daniel Arap Moy with more.
Despite the talks between China and the US making substantial progress, attempts by the US to exert extreme pressure has only led to what Beijing says is a justified counterattack. Chinese ambassador to Kenya, Wu Peng, while addressing Kenya Editors Guild, said China is open to meaningful talks.
China is always open for talk, but it would fight to the end should a trade war break out. The recent announcement on countermeasures is proof that China is fully prepared.
Huawei Technologies Senior Director of Public Affairs in Kenya says the company will stand by its customers and consumers across the globe.
Whatever happens, we will be here to support those companies, as well as our consumers who have our smartphones and our tablets.
The ambassador reiterated Beijing's commitment in protecting the interests of China and the people of Kenya, with Kenya welcoming the growing ties between the two countries.
Our relationship is really based on mutual trust, mutual respect, and equality.
He called on the media to exhibit professionalism in their coverage in order to build investor confidence not only in Kenya but Africa as a continent. Wu Peng pledged to continue pushing forward Kenya and China's bilateral relations to new heights in order to bring tangible benefits for the people of the two countries. Daniel Arap Moy, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Right, then away from East Africa, the price of fuel at the pump in Zimbabwe has gone up by nearly 50% after the government over there withdrew subsidies to fuel companies on Tuesday. Now, the move is part of the latest round of efforts to tackle a critical shortage of fuel and to address other challenges facing the economy. Here's CGTN's Farai Muktuya with the details on this shock move.
It's been a frantic 48 hours during which Zimbabwe's central bank has secured a $500 million facility which will be drawn down and injected into the interbank foreign currency market.
Just looking at the figures, roughly we've seen below 100 million is actually exchanged on the market. And what we continue to see, especially from companies, manufacturing companies that have gone on the interbank market looking for FX, they've not been able to access anything.
But some here believe throwing money at the problem without addressing the underlying issues is futile.
We might bring 500 million and then in a couple of months we're going to look for some more and some more and some more, which really doesn't help. What we need is a fundamental rethink of, number one, the issue of the currency and its stability, what we have to put into place, and number two, the issue of exports and imports, because that's where the problem is coming from.
A day after announcing the loan, the central bank withdrew subsidies to the fuel sector. From accessing hard currency at 1-to-1, fuel companies will now get US dollars at the prevailing bank rate. This translated into a 47% jump in the cost of petrol and diesel. These more market-driven prices are expected to improve supplies and hopefully see queues like this disappear. It's the second fuel price increase in 5 months. A 150% hike in January led to violent protests, which government is hoping to avert this time by slashing in half the cost of public transport to cushion commuters. That will cost Treasury about $8 million per month, and along with the burden of the $500 million loan, has raised concerns over the government's fiscal reform program and could scuttle efforts to tame galloping inflation, now at an 11-year high, 76%. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Well, Well, still in Southern Africa, Zambia's High Court has appointed a legal firm as a provisional liquidator of Vedanta-controlled Konkola copper mines. Now, the court named the Zambian law firm Lungu Simwanza and Company to oversee KCM a day after the head of state, Edgar Lungu, said that Zambia planned to strip the company of its mining license and bring in a new investor. Now, the firm is appointed to act as a provisional liquidator until the conclusion of a hearing of a petition that's been brought by Zambia's mining investment arm under Zambia's Corporate Insolvency Act or a further order. International miners have warned that Zambia's actions will deter foreign investment at a time it is in great need of external finances in order to pay off its relatively high levels of debt. All right then, so where does this exactly leave Africa's second largest producer of copper? Let's find out. Ted Blom is an expert in mining and energy issues. He joins me now live from Johannesburg. Ted, good to see you. So as a minority shareholder and a sovereign, what laws allow the government to trigger this sort of provisional liquidation? It does seem to have come a bit out of the blue.
Absolutely. So this is the conundrum of being in the commodities business, is that the prices are incredibly volatile, whereas governments and companies' budgets only go one way, and that's up over time. So with the fact that the commodity price of copper has been pretty much stagnant over the last 3 or 4 years at around $6,000 a ton, fiscus in Zambia is under pressure because they can't increase revenue, and likewise the companies become under pressure as well, and they start crooking the books by playing around with transfer pricing. And this is the making of a big fight. At the end of the day, if the government finds out that the company has been less than honest in its bookkeeping and transfer pricing, that gives them every right to actually take back the mining license.
Right, so a common argument that we keep hearing from the state in Zambia is that the idea here is to kick out Vedanta and Glencore, presumably, and replace them with other investors. But given the business environment in Zambia at the moment, who'd really be keen on putting money in there, especially in a copper mine?
Well, this is the nature of mining, is that you'll always find a new fool around the block who would think that he'd believe the promises made and put his investment back in the country. We've seen that throughout Africa, where certain companies have either disinvested or been forced out, including the DRC, where Canadian companies were booted out and others came in. The attraction's just too big, and hence, as I said, you'll always find a fool around the block who will come in and fill the vacuum.
Related to that, though, why shouldn't the Zambian government just not go this alone? Why bring in a third party at all?
Well, I think that they're trying to they're trying to legitimize the whole process. But I think the governance model needs attention, because we have the same problem recurring time and time again throughout Africa. When the commodity prices are low, governments want a bigger slice of the action to balance their budgets, and then when the commodity prices are high, the governments all want to impose super tax on that commodity. So it's a question of greed, and that's greed from the mining houses side and probably greed from the fiscus side. And if those two don't meet each other halfway and plan for some stability going forward, it will make for a very rocky marriage.
Indeed. So Konkola Copper Mines released its numbers the other day, and it pointed out that the cost of production, excluding royalty payments, was about 276 cents per pound, and that's marginally higher than where copper prices are at the moment. So is this lack of profitability, is it just limited to KCM, or is Zambia's entire copper sector at least unprofitable at current prices?
Okay, so where you've got where the problem arises is when you've got multinational mining houses that mine in one territory and market in another territory. So they can play with transfer pricing and management fee pricing so as to minimize tax liability in the domicile where they are mining and maximize it in the tax-free haven where they're doing the marketing. And most major mining houses, Glencore, certainly the top 5 mining houses, in one way or the other, are always guilty of something very similar. We had that in South Africa as well, where there was major transfer pricing issues between the multinationals and their local subsidiaries here. And they always keep them on a shoestring so that they don't have to pay high taxes in the mining environment, and they take major profits off in a tax-free environment. It's an old game. It's been around for as long as mining has been around. So the question is how to stamp it out. And that's where a good governance regime and an undertaking to by the fiscus not to overreach can go a long way to making for a happy marriage. But if it's managed on an ad hoc basis, you're going to have this ping pong game going on and on, depending on where the price is at any particular time. And it's not healthy because it doesn't provide for stability of the workforce, it doesn't provide for stability of reinvesting in mining. Mining is a reinvesting game. You have to keep on investing in new phases and new development and new exploration. Otherwise, you come to the end of your life of mine.
All right, marriage analogies in a conversation about copper mining. Thank you very much. Ted Blom, of course, live in Johannesburg, South Africa. Time now for a run through some company headlines. And let's start our company headline section in the commodity sector. Shell says that Nigeria's Transfocados pipeline is still shut down after fire broke out on it on Sunday. Now, the oil company that manages the crude exports terminal, that Shell, also confirmed that no force majeure had been declared so far. Heritage Energy, though, that's a company that operates the pipeline, is yet to confirm if the pipeline itself was affected, but local residents are saying that the fire was still raging on Tuesday, the 21st of May. De Beers has reported sales of $415 million from its auction of rough diamonds in May. That figure is well under the $522 million raised from sales that we saw in May 2017, and it's nowhere near the $636 million that we saw in May 2016 from the exact same activity. Now, the diamond miner says that sales were down against a backdrop of macroeconomic uncertainty and the seasonally slower period for the industry as a whole. Onto the FMCG side of things, Coca-Cola is announcing that it's dropped plans to re-franchise its Africa bottling business, Coca-Cola Beverages Africa. The beverage giant says it believes it's in the best interests of all involved for Coca-Cola to continue to hold and operate CCBA. Now, originally, the plan was to divest its manufacturing and distribution assets in order to focus on its core beverage business as well as boost its margins. And finally, the US car maker Ford has revealed plans to cut about 10% of its global workforce, effectively slashing some 7,000 jobs by the end of August. The car maker says this is part of a larger restructuring effort that ideally should save the number 2 car maker in the US some $600 million a year. Ford has been restructuring operations around the world in a bid to improve profitability, but also speed up product development. It's already made and announced these cuts in Europe, South America, and Russia. That's a run through your company headlines. You're watching Global Business Africa. It's time for a short break. Here's what's coming up next. When we come back, we'll explore if the US had anything to do with the current economic turmoil in Sudan. And Malawians were voting today in what's expected to be a very tightly contested poll. We'll be live in Blantyre shortly. There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN. See the difference. Welcome back to the program. Now, in part, the sit-in protests that eventually led to the ouster of Omar Hassan al-Bashir, remember him, the former president of Sudan, these sit-in protests were a direct response to a long-running economic crisis, which included sky-high inflation, fuel and foreign exchange shortages, and soaring food prices. Citizens basically were backed into a corner. But some argue that long-running US sanctions on Sudan also contributed to the crisis.
For 20 years, the US had imposed trade sanctions on Sudan. Experts claim these sanctions kept the country's economy in stranglehold. Businesses are unable to operate dollar transactions and investors have shied away.
Babies die because of lack of medicine and equipment. The main cause of their death is the US sanction and the hegemony. If not for these sanctions on the Sudanese economy, I think Sudan would have risen up. It would have benefited from the multiple resources in oil, minerals, agriculture and industry. It is very important to point out that the American sanctions, unfair policies and hegemony crippled the Sudanese economy and limited development of the country.
The US has in currency and weapons the control over the primary principle. Therefore, they impose the conditions and press the other side. The former government would meet the request and the new list came out.
The United States planned and led the separation of the South. They wanted a newborn state in the South in its control to benefit from its resources and strategic role in the Horn of Africa. Sudan lost 70% of its resources. Oil sector took a hit, which led to a serious economic crisis in Khartoum.
Washington later lifted the trade sanctions on Sudan in October 2017, but the state sponsor of terrorism listing remained. It has warned it will continue to block access to funding until Sudan is off the terrorism list.
Until the moment, Sudan is unable to reintegrate with the international banking system. This measure has affected the citizens inside and outside Sudan. I do not think there is a clear reason and justified reason why Sudan is on the list for state sponsors for terrorism.
Washington announced in November last year it was beginning talks with Khartoum to remove the listing, but the process was delayed in January by the US government shutdown. Chom Honor, CGTN.
Vote tallying is underway in polling stations across Malawi as the Southern African nation selects a new head of state and new members of parliament. CGTN's Wilkista Nyambo reports that the exercise today was largely uneventful.
Dawn found voters lining up outside polling centers across Malawi in schoolyards converted into polling centers for the day. Here voters waited patiently for the polls to open. There were over 1,000 polling centers spread over 193 constituencies. A section experienced slight delays as polling officials hurried to complete the setup.
So far on voting day, things appear to have gone relatively well. Our reports from our observers deployed around all the regions indicate that at least 60% of polling stations began on time. Another 40% began a bit after 6 o'clock, but latest by 20 minutes after 6, 6:30, most of them had started.
Voting was largely peaceful. Electoral officials carefully inspected voters' registration cards, giving priority to the elderly. However, voters who had lost their voter cards were still allowed to cast their votes as long as their names were in the National Register. Voters braved winding queues, hoping to make their voices heard through their votes.
I expect great change from this election, the kind that will impress every Malawian.
Among the major government projects in a rural community like this is to have better schools, good roads and even better hospitals.
Incumbent President Peter Mutharika, who cast his vote just outside Blantyre, is hoping to secure his second term. Mutharika faces a challenge from his former Vice President Saulos Chilima and the leader of the largest party in parliament, Lazarus Chakwera. Over 6.8 million Malawians registered to vote in these elections. Once the polls close, vote tallying will be done at the polling centers and the results will be relayed to the National Tallying Center in Blantyre. The Electoral Commission has 8 days to announce the results of the elections. Wilkista Nyambo, CGTN, Blantyre, Malawi.
Earlier on, CGTN's Wilkista Nyambo did speak to the incumbent President Peter Mutharika about his first term in office and why he thinks the citizens of this landlocked Southeast African country should give him a second 5-year term in office.
Mr. President, thank you very much for making the time to join us today. Perhaps we can start by talking about the youth. Now, the youth constitute a very large block of voters. Some of the concerns they have spoken about are unemployment. How do you intend to address some of the issues that they have raised?
God, first of all, as you probably know, I'm the global champion for the youth, the United Nations, and I'm also African Union champion for the youth, and also Africa-China champion for the youth. So I hold 3 youth positions gradually. So I'm committed to the youth. Now, I'm aware that there are those problems here and also elsewhere of the youth. It's a very complicated problem, and because some of the youth, the economy is not big enough to absorb the youth. You are talking about 52% population is supposed to be youth, which means if we are 18 million people, it means 9 million, 10 million are youth. And among those, maybe half, maybe 5 million are really of sort of working age. And it's a challenge to observe now what I've done in this country. When I started in 2014, we started to establish community technical colleges because I realized that the economy was not big enough to absorb everybody. That if all the jobs in the private sector and public sector were put together, they would accommodate less than 20% of the job-seeking population. It's that difficult. So I started these community technical colleges. The country, so far, we have built 28, one in each district, 28 districts. Beginning July, we'll be moving to constituencies. So each of the 193 constituencies will have a community technical college. Now, in this college, we train the youth things like carpentry, bricklaying, ICT, welding, plumbing, beauty technology, and it's about 7 or 8 skills. We also engage in massive infrastructure projects, building roads, houses, school buildings, teachers' houses. In all those places, jobs are being created and the youth are being employed. So we're doing that, and of course we'll continue to do so, expand the programs.
One of the major concerns in Malawi is the issue of corruption. How does your government intend to tackle graft?
A lot of people are being tried. About 15 have so far been convicted. After Cashgate, we had a British company that audited, gave a report on what had happened, Baker Tilly. So we have that report, we are pursuing that, and we are empowering the Director of Public Anti-Corruption Bureau, Director of Public Prosecutions, the Director of Financial Intelligence Agency, and also the Director of Fiscal Police. Those 4 entities. We're empowering them, and they work together. Assist fight corruption. Another fight against corruption assets declaration, that all senior officials beyond a certain level are required annually to declare their assets. And that's important, so that there's transparency there. So we are fighting corruption, but it's always a problem. It is a difficult problem, but we're doing our best. When I took over in 2014, inflation, the economy had collapsed. Inflation was what, 37%, it's now 8%. Interest rates were about 42%, they're now 16%. It's still high, but going down. Foreign reserves had only 1 month import cover, it's now 6 months. The highest in history. The kwacha has stabilized for over 2 years. Economy is now stabilized, everyone agrees, even the IMF, the World Bank, the European Union, everyone agrees. We have stabilized the economy. It's beginning to grow now. This year it will grow at 3.9%, the highest in the SADC region. According to IMF figures that came out last week, it may grow next year at about 5%.
The Tanzania-based Acacia Mining has confirmed that Tanzania's government is considering slapping its North Mara mine with an environmental protection order. The mining company says that the order is because of alleged historical breaches of environmental laws. Now, that could include paying a $2.4 million fine. Here's CGTN's Daniel Kijo with more from Dar es Salaam.
Acacia says that its North Mara gold mine has received a verbal notice from the government of Tanzania that it is to be issued an environmental protection order. The order is because of its alleged leakage at its wastewater storage pond. The National Environmental Management Council says the mine has not complied with fixing the breaches of various environmental regulations, a situation that the Minister of Environment says has been a decade-long issue.
If one tells you for 10 years, please fix this, and you're not, you have to face severe punishment. So one, repetitiveness. Two, scale. The scale of pollution is massive, and the impacts are seen.
The government also says there are discharge of hazardous water coming from the mine. Now, once the order is issued, Acacia will be required to pay a $2.4 million fine within 14 days.
In the next couple of days, about 3 to 4 days, we are going to serve them an official order, that is going to actually make them pay this amount of money. And of course, if they fail, that we've been unfair to them, they'll have the right to appeal.
The Environmental Council says this fine is for not containing chemical waste as instructed, breaching environmental laws, and providing misleading information to the government and the public. It added that the company will have to fix any breaches to the existing infrastructure and construct a new wastewater storage facility. But Acacia's technical team says it has been collaborating with the government and it's been trying to address its concerns. The battle between President Magufuli's government and Acacia Mining has become one of the defining issues of his presidency. He says he's trying to make sure that Tanzania's riches are shared by all the people and for companies to comply with the regulations. Daniel Kijo, CGTN, Dar es Salaam, Tanzania.
It's about 18:31 GMT. Time for a short break. Here's what's coming up next. Yet another Chinese handset manufacturer is jumping into the European market. And we'll also be exploring China's growing appetite for beef from Brazil.
Accra is my kind of city. That's because when I'm here, I feel like I'm back home in Lagos or Abidjan, which are two of the major cities I grew up in. See, business in Africa is high risk. After about a decade covering business news on the continent, I've learned it's all about the high risk, but also the high returns and the high energy. You simply have to adjust in order to keep pace. When I started out as a journalist, my dream was to open people's minds to the different perspectives. From the CEO in the boardroom to the trader out in the street, we all have different stories. From Accra to Addis Ababa, from Cairo to Cape Town, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Here at CGTN, we realize that Africa is on the move, and it's moving fast, but we're moving right along with it. I'm Ucheo Koronkwo, and I'm a business anchor and reporter at CGTN.
Welcome back. Let's recap the stories making your headlines at this hour. The World Health Organization is calling on all political actors in the DRC to join efforts in the battle against Ebola. The WHO's chief, Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, is warning that the risk of spread of this hemorrhagic fever is still pretty high. More than 1,000 people, remember, in the DRC have died since the outbreak started in August. In Uganda, search and rescue efforts are still ongoing after a boat capsized in Lake Albert. The boat was carrying more than 50 football players and fans from the western Uganda district of Hoima. They were travelling to the Runga landing site for a friendly match between two local clubs. So far, 16 people have been reported dead at this incident. Another 32 were rescued, but some are still missing. As mentioned a little earlier in the bulletin, Malawians have voted on Tuesday to elect a new president and members of parliament and local government councillors too. There are 7 presidential candidates, but only 3 are seen to have a realistic chance of winning the race. All of them Amen. The current president, Peter Mutharika, of the ruling Democratic Progressive Party, is seeking a second term in office. He's being challenged by his own vice president, Saulos Chilima. The third serious contender is Lazarus Chakwera. He's the leader of the main opposition, Malawi Congress Party. And finally, Sudan's ruling Transitional Military Council and protesters yet again have failed to strike a deal. The sit-in and protests in Khartoum are therefore continuing. In the capital, demonstrators are demanding a transition to civilian rule and justice for the deaths of protesters. A 3-year transitional period has generally been agreed upon, but the deadlock remains on who will control a sovereign council that will hold power. That's a run through your headlines. Let's get back into the business of tech for a moment. Despite being one of the world's top 5 smartphone manufacturers, unless you're in Asia or Africa, you really wouldn't have heard of a brand called Oppo. But that is changing as the company is moving into the crowded UK marketplace. Here's CGTN's Richard Bestick now taking a look at some of the challenges facing this Chinese handset manufacturer as it launches its new handsets in the UK.
A smartphone launch always creates something of a buzz in the world of high tech, and the launch of Oppo's new offerings no different.
For those in the know, this new device seems to be the middle market real deal.
It has everything a demanding marketplace could realistically want or need, say the professionals, and essentially at a carefully positioned price.
The device is really nice to hold, apart from being a bit slippery. And the software seems to run really well, so initial impressions are quite positive.
Well, I like the design first, the all-view display on the front, they call the panoramic screen. It's really nice.
The phone looks really nice as well. You can't really fault the phone for the style. I think it has everything on there that everyone wants as well.
However, as this corporate video illustrates, while a mix of marketing savvy, tech innovation and clever pricing may have helped Oppo win more than a 15% share of the Chinese market, in the UK's intensely competitive smartphone arena, it's the biggest brand nobody's heard of.
Oppo's gotta make its brand known in Britain, and linking up with the Cricket World Cup is one way of doing that.
Such partnerships don't come cheap, but Oppo's global marketing director recognises the challenge.
But we have our confidence and we have our strategic patience to win over the heart of the consumers in Europe and in UK here. First thing we need to do well is really to build the brand awareness, to let more consumers know about Oppo and what Oppo stands for.
Oppo then warning rivals it's here in the UK with both financial barrels fully loaded and with time on its side. Richard Bestick, CGTN, London.
Brazilian beef exporters expect China to drive the nation's shipments to a record high this year. China, of course, is the world's fastest growing market for beef. Its demand for meat continues to grow as household incomes go up and the country gradually moves towards being a more consumption-driven economy.
Eating Brazilian barbecue while listening to samba music is always a good choice for Liu Qiang to treat his friends or celebrate.
I come here every 1 or 2 months. A Brazilian friend took me here. I like the authentic meat and the vibe.
In Shanghai, Brazilian barbecue is just as popular as the Brazilian soccer team and samba music.
Sometimes during lunch we can turn over around 2 times and our seating capacity is around 250 people.
China is the world's fast-growing market for beef. Its imports have almost tripled since 2014.
Rapid economic growth in China over the past decade has expanded its middle class, and their demand for the red meat is on the rise.
Brazil is the world's top exporter of beef. It has sold record volumes of beef driven by strong demand from China. CP Group is the biggest importer of Brazilian beef in China. Its import volume has doubled every year in the past 3 years.
Most of the Brazilian beef is processed and consumed through the central kitchens of restaurant chains. It is highly popular in the business-to-business market. We will provide more smaller packages and do more marketing campaigns in the future.
According to ABIC, an association of more than 30 Brazilian meatpacking companies, Brazil exported over 1.6 million tons of beef in 2018, of which the Chinese mainland and Hong Kong accounted for 44%.
China's domestic supply of beef can't meet its demand. While most of Brazil's beef products are suitable for Chinese cooking and eating habits and at a moderate price, there is a great potential for the beef trade in future.
Industry insiders say the escalating trade friction between China and the US may create a gap in the market for Brazilian beef suppliers and turn the product into an alternative for the US beef in case it becomes too expensive due to rising tariffs. Lin Nan, CGTN, Shanghai.
Airbnb, the company is projecting that at least 40% of its business will be in emerging markets by 2030. The home-sharing platform is currently booming in China. It made about $2.4 billion in revenue last year, accounting for over 6% of China's entire accommodation market. CGTN's Guanxin caught up with the co-founder of Airbnb to seek insights on the future of this sharing giant.
Well, the sharing economy is such a broad kind of definition. There's so many different companies within that. Looking at home sharing, it's been 11 years now since Airbnb was founded, and I think it's definitely gone mainstream. More than 500 million guests have stayed in Airbnbs. At the same time, I still think it's relatively early days. I think the next 10 years will bring a lot more growth and a lot more change and innovation. So I think it depends how you look at it.
So what new technologies will reshape the sharing economy's future?
It's hard to predict the future, but a few things I'd say. One is digital identity. The stronger sense of digital identity, which is already a trend. It's gotten better over the last 10 years, but there's still room for improvement in terms of knowing someone's true digital identity. That's necessary for creating trust, which is really important for sharing and doing e-commerce. So I think digital identity will continue to improve. Two, fintech. There's a lot happening in fintech already. On-demand insurance products and loans, and within just our business alone, to date we've transacted $65 billion of commerce. So I think with all that commerce flowing, I think fintech is going to be, could be integrated into the business model more. Third is, of course, artificial intelligence. There's so much data out there, but how do you make sense of it? Well, AI is going to help turn that into more of a consumer product. So think about travel planning and think about how many different sites you have to go to research and look at different things. AI will help make a more intelligent recommendation of an itinerary for you, so you don't have to piece it together yourself.
We have seen big growth in the sector and big money invested in it, but it also faces many challenges such as regulatory issues. In your opinion, what do we stand right now?
I think in China we've been very happy with our success. Our initial focus was on offering outbound travel options to Chinese travelers. We have more than 5 million homes around the world. And so we had a lot of success offering that. Millions of Chinese used Airbnb, but now actually most of our business is domestic. Chinese traveling within China, and specifically tier 2, tier 3 cities is the fastest growing segment. Just in the first quarter of 2019, we've seen more than 200% growth in terms of destination arrivals within China. So we're very happy with the progress. And look, it's a growing market. So competition-wise, I don't think our success has come at the expense of others, nor vice versa. There's room for more than one player and a lot of growth to be had.
What about policy front? The Chinese government aims to open further to the outside world and impact from that.
The national government has basically identified sharing economy as being very important to the future of China. There are some estimates that 5 years from now, it could be 20% of the economy. So it's very important for China's economic growth. And therefore, there's a lot of interest in thinking about what is the right regulatory framework to shape that growth. And we certainly believe there should be one. And there's been a lot of good dialogue amongst all the industry companies to help give input into those policies. Last year we worked with the China State Information Center to provide our input and comments, and the work goes on. I think carefully crafted regulation will make a lot of sense. It will allow for the next wave of growth and serve everyone's interests.
So more regulations is a good thing for the sector's development.
Yeah, if the regulation is right, then it's actually going to propel the growth further.
Now, Sunday evenings or early Mondays, depending on which end of the planet you're in, won't be the same for millions of Game of Thrones fans around the world. After 8 seasons, the last episode of this record-breaking fantasy series was finally broadcast. So then, the watch may have ended and winter may have come and gone, but don't think for a minute that this is where A Song of Ice and Fire comes to an end. CGTN's Owen Fairclough explains on what's hot tonight.
There are no spoilers here if you haven't yet seen the final episode of Game of Thrones, but it's no secret that this was the end of an era in television. The last series broke audience records. 18.4 million watched the penultimate episode in the US alone. That's the kind of shared TV event that's disappearing in an era of on-demand streaming services. But it was also panned by some fans, partly due to production gaffes, and a petition calling for creators HBO to remake it has collected more than 1 million signatures.
Way too boring and long.
God, it sucked.
I loved it.
I actually enjoyed it. They twisted the story up too much for my likings this season, but I think they carried it out well without damaging their storyline too much.
All my life I've known one goal: the Iron Throne.
And there was uproar in China after Tencent, which broadcast the show there, postponed airing the final episode due to what it called media transfer issues. Even so, record audience figures make Game of Thrones valuable property for parent company AT&T. It's launching its own streaming service to try to recoup viewers, abandoning traditional cable TV. In any case, Game of Thrones isn't quite over yet. A spin-off is already in the works, and the TV series long ago overtook the original novels, so author George R.R. Martin has yet to write his own ending to a classic that's left the fans craving more. Owen Fairclough, CGTN, Washington.
All right then, we'll leave it there for the time being as far as Game of Thrones is concerned. A quick run through commodity prices here for you. So, a key pipeline in Nigeria, the Transfer Cargo's pipeline, as I mentioned a little earlier, it's still shut down. There was a fire that broke out. We're not sure if it's on the pipeline or around the pipeline on the 19th of May. According to the pipeline operator, though, the fire was relatively close to the facility, but it isn't clear if the pipeline itself has been affected. Nonetheless, the shutdown basically means that you're looking at 240,000 barrels a day of crude not flowing into the market. Here's what's coming up next. We'll introduce you to a young man with a plan to recycle the bulk of the garbage generated in Dakar. Welcome back. Tunisia has launched a smart cities project that aims to assist municipalities over there with the transition into planning and building more intelligent and sustainable urban environments. The initiative offers a technical community through which experts seek to help local officials address the challenges that are posed by rapid urban population growth. Here's CGTN's Adnan Chachi with this report.
Authorities in Tunis have launched the ambitious project Tunisian Smart Cities in partnership with the civil society. The innovative concept designates a city using information and communication technologies to improve the quality of urban services and reduce its costs.
The smart city evokes the culmination of the evolution of our cities towards an approach to society and lifestyles more respectful of resources and individuals.
Tunisian smart cities set up a type of urban development capable of responding to the evolution or emergence of the needs of institutions, businesses and citizens, both economically, socially and environmentally.
We have created a smart city perimeter in each municipality. Each zone will be turned into a smart ecosystem in which young entrepreneurs can work. Several applications have been developed to facilitate transport, parking, health, public lighting and environment to improve citizens' life.
The Minister of Telecommunication Technologies and Digital Economy noted that Smart Cities project is the pillar of the Tunisia's digital strategy 2025.
Tunisia aims to review urban planning nationwide in a smart and more efficient way by 2025. Smart Tunisia will create new job opportunities for Tunisian companies and skills. A new internal market will see light to develop smart digital platforms to put in place the Digital Tunisia concept.
Tunisia's Smart Cities Caravan Roadshow has started in Bizerta in the north of the country. It will end in June in the city of Carthage. The caravan will visit all regions in 2 months to create a vibrant and modern cities network and share knowledge, experience and good practices.
Experts at the Ministry of Telecommunication Technologies and Digital Economy say the smart city concept will integrate ICT with various physical devices connected to the Internet of Things network to optimize the efficiency of city operations and services and connect to citizens. Adan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
In South Africa, the government is doing its best to adapt to a new age of tech. It recently hosted the first event focusing on the current and future digital skills that will be required in the job market. This event was held in Johannesburg. It's called the My Future 4.0 Summit. CGTN's Julie Shire was there.
Workplaces and industries are investing more in robotics and other innovative technology. For at least 2/3 of children entering school now, their jobs do not yet exist. But preparing them for the future is vital.
Hello China Global TV Network. My name is Pepper Robot Say. I am at the My Future 4.0 Summit. I am the ambassador for the summit, and I am here to let South African children know that the future is now, and they will need to learn new subjects like coding and robotics, because they will be working with robots in their future.
Pepper is a humanoid which meets and greets people at places like banks, hotels and museums. It wows learners who will soon be faced with making tough career choices.
I saw things that I haven't seen in my life, and it's great to be here. I learn more things. There's more careers.
Technology has improved a lot. I've learned how to make games and also do IT. I've been also on radio.
Robots are already being used in factories and other areas. It's raised concerns that humans may soon be replaced, leading to more job losses in a weak South African economy.
People are looking to have processes done for them a lot easier, especially ones that are repetitive. They're not going to replace all our jobs, but there are jobs that can be done by robots a lot clearer, a lot faster and a lot simpler.
The skills that people really need to work on is things like creativity, flexibility, problem solving and all those kind of things. So I think platforms like these would open the minds of our youth and our parents and our teachers to bridge that gap. So now we know what we need to do and how we need to do it to get there.
The fourth industrial revolution is certainly infiltrating everyday life, but for almost 30% of South Africans who are unemployed and locked out of the job market, technology means little when they are still struggling to survive. Julie Shire, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Pig farming has taken off in Zimbabwe over the years as more and more farmers opt to diversify their livestock investments. CGTN's Alexandria Majala takes up that story on Grassroots tonight.
Once shunned due to varying religious beliefs, consumption of pork and other white meat has increased globally due to varying health benefits. Pig farming has become a very lucrative business around the world and is increasingly becoming a source of livelihood for some households in Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe's agriculture sector has witnessed growth since the introduction of the Command Agriculture Scheme, which has encouraged more people to invest in the sector. Pig farming is now practiced both at commercial level and at smallholder farmer scale.
Pig farming is good business if one does it properly. Our governments should support us farmers, especially on price controls and on prices of feed and chemicals needed, which will help us sustain our business.
Pig farming involves a lot of challenges, including changes in climatic conditions causing heat stress, which can result in reduced productivity, including fertility problems. Other challenges include high cost of stock feed and veterinary medicines, a ban on fresh pork exports, as well as low demand due to low consumer spending.
Because we are supporting our government.
We are supporting the government, and we hope the government will also help us even by offering more assistance to such projects so that more and more farmers embark on them and increase supply.
The Zimbabwe Pig Industry Board says over 13,000 tons were produced through registered abattoirs in 2018, compared to about 11,000 in 2017. The number of slaughtered pigs increased by nearly 20% in 2018. Alexandria Majala for CGTN.
On to Senegal now, where a young entrepreneur has set up a plan to drive environmental change through recycling. You see, all kinds of waste materials tend to be mixed and disposed together, and that makes the process of recycling it that much harder, if not entirely impossible. It's also considered to be hazardous, not just to the environment, but also to people as well.
Waste recycling aims to promote environmental conservation through proper waste management. In Dakar, Cyprovis initiative is planning to do just that. The company targets areas that are difficult for municipal garbage trucks to reach.
Cyprovis is a solution that can be applied to several regions of Senegal to solve the problem of waste management. Here, the neighborhoods are poorly parceled out and very narrow, making them difficult for garbage trucks to access. We have therefore thought of a means of collection that can reach within these neighborhoods, so the service we offer starts where municipal service stops.
The finance graduate launched the startup company in 2014. It currently employs 15 full-time workers with over 1,000 subscribers across the capital.
Every day I inquire about the situation with our customers. In particular, I ask if the collecting agents have been there and if they have done a good job. The objective is to collect the necessary information that allows us to ensure complete customer satisfaction.
Cyprovis is the solution to a problem we have long faced, that of being able to dispose our garbage on a regular basis. They introduced us to sorting, and that is something we didn't know how to do. Whether it is my family, household staff or children, everyone has been educated and we sort according to recyclable and non-recyclable waste.
Services offered range from $9 to $26 for households and $170 to $340 for businesses.
For this work to have the greatest impact, a change in mentality is needed, which is why we rely heavily on awareness. We have a meeting scheduled with young students to talk to them about the responsibility that everyone has to protect our environment and the impact of our daily actions on the degradation of this environment.
The long-term objective is to go beyond sorting and collection of waste. For Cyprovis, its main focus is training its agents and raise awareness among its customers on proper management and environmental protection. Tlanela Lupuwana, CGTN.
All right, then a quick run through the currencies here for you. So some slight gains showing up on the South African rand today, 14.19 showing up in the course of trading. As we get closer and closer to the composition of a new cabinet, that might be reflected over there. The Senate in the Republic of Congo, not the DRC, they share a border, but they're two different countries. They also voted today to approve the restructuring of debt issued by China. Both countries agreed to that in April, but as far as we can tell, the restructuring doesn't cover all of the $2.5 billion lent by China. At this point, though, it puts the country a step closer to locking an IMF bailout, which has been in the works since around 2017. The CFA franc, which Congo uses alongside 6 other Central African states, that's down over 26% against the American dollar so far this year. That's it for tonight's edition of Global Business Africa. As always, we'd like to hear your thoughts on the content you've seen here in the last hour. There's several ways of getting your thoughts back to us. All of them are on your screens right now. I'm Ramah Nyang in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. Thank you for your company in the last hour. The World Today is up next from Washington, D.C.